Courage is Calling, Fortune Favors the Brave, Ryan Holiday. Book link. Click here. Here is a summary of the introduction. Courage is highly prized but in short supply. This is not because courage is scarce like precious stones or oil. Courage is renewable and accessible to all. We have daily opportunities to show courage in all areas of life. But courage remains rare because we are afraid. Fear holds us back. It's easier to avoid getting involved or taking action. It's more comfortable to avoid strenuous or risky situations. We have something else we value more than courage, like comfort, safety, or conformity. We prioritize those things over courage. The book explores why we lack courage and offers ways to cultivate it. We need courage now more than ever in these difficult times. The future depends on our choices today and our willingness to face hard things. The introduction references the story of Hercules at a crossroads, choosing between an easy, tempting path and a complex, virtuous path. We all face similar choices in life between what is right and what is easy. The book examines how we can, like Hercules, choose the courageous path. Courage comes in many forms but fundamentally is about overcoming fear and taking risks. Florence Nightingale received a call as a teenager to a life of service but initially struggled to overcome her fears and the expectations placed on her as a woman in that era. We all face moments where we must choose between courage and fear. History remembers and celebrates those who choose courage. Fear takes many forms, including terror, apathy, hatred, and playing it small. We must understand fear to overcome it. Great acts of courage, both large and small, have driven human progress. Though courage is rare, it need not be. Choosing courage over fear is a pivotal moment in any life and what allows for beautiful and memorable things to happen. The overall message is that courage is a choice, and we can all overcome fear and do courageous things, whether for ourselves or others. Fear is a natural part of life, but we must not let it rule us. With courage, ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things. Florence Nightingale came from a wealthy family that expected her to marry well and lead a life of leisure, as was customary for women in Victorian England. However, Nightingale felt called to serve others through nursing, despite being an unusual path for a woman of her social standing. She struggled for years with this calling due to fear of disappointing her family, being seen as unsuitable, and the immense challenges of pioneering modern nursing. After 16 years of grappling with this fear and refusing the call to service, Nightingale finally found the courage to pursue her calling. She volunteered to help wounded soldiers in the Crimean War, where conditions were horrendous. Nightingale funded improvements herself and worked tirelessly to provide care and comfort, becoming known as the Lady with the Lamp. Her pioneering work went on to inspire the Red Cross and transform nursing. Though Nightingale's family had tried to dissuade her, she proved to be like an eagle. Once she took flight into her calling, she was fearless. Her story shows how fear can hold us back from our purpose and destiny, but we can accept the call with courage. The key message is that fear often prevents us from pursuing our calling and purpose. Like Nightingale, we must find the courage to overcome fear and self-doubt to accept the call to our destiny. Though the path may be difficult, we can achieve great things by conquering fear. Nightingale's pioneering work and her triumph over fear to transform nursing stand as an inspiring example. Feeling fear in uncertain times is easy and natural, but we should not let fear rule or prevent us from taking action. Fear is an emotional reaction, while courage is a choice. Fear holds us back and prevents us from seeing clearly and acting rationally. Successful people and leaders can overcome their fears through courage and logic. We can defeat fear by attacking it logically and rationally. Explain the source of anxiety, understand the facts, and see that fear is often based on false evidence appearing real. Logical explanations can help overcome irrational fears. Pericles provides 2 examples of overcoming fear through logic and reason. He explained the source of thunder to his fearful troops by smashing rocks together to demonstrate the sound. He also described an eclipse by covering a man with his cloak to show it was just something blocking the light, like his cloak, but larger. Life is unpredictable, so fear and doubt are natural. But bravery means facing difficulties with calm, reason, and clarity. We must logically understand fearful events and be persistent in facing challenges. Fear often comes from catastrophizing and exaggerating threats in our minds. The message is that fear should not rule us or stop us. Have courage, see challenges clearly through reason, and do not be afraid to act in the face of difficulty or uncertainty. With courage and logic, we can overcome fear. Here is a summary of the passages. Fear is often rooted in a concern for what other people think of us. But we should not let the fear of criticism or judgment hold us back from doing what we believe is right. Those who make a real difference are often criticized at first. The obstacles and critics in our way are often less numerous than they seem. Our fears tend to make the threats appear larger than they are. When we face our fears, we often find that reality is not as bad as we imagined. To overcome fear, we should define exactly what we fear. Vague fears and anxieties hold more power over us. By articulating our fears concretely, we can evaluate how realistic they are and prepare to handle them. This helps make the fears less frightening and helps us feel more in control. Preparing for potential problems and setbacks in advance, even unlikely disasters, helps make them feel less shocked if they do come to pass. We should consider how we respond to challenging situations before they happen. The key message is that fear loses its power when facing it directly by defining our fears, evaluating their likelihood and severity, and preparing ourselves to handle them. This helps us feel less frightened and more in control. Difficulties and adversity are inevitable in life. We will all face hardships, setbacks, failures, heartbreaks, and losses. Instead of worrying about these inevitabilities, focus on using them to become better and stronger. Our struggles become our experience and armor. Fear and anxiety are universal human experiences. We all feel overwhelmed and afraid at times. But dwelling on fears and catastrophizing the future does not help. It only distracts and paralyzes us. In moments of fear and difficulty, focus on the task before you. Take things one step at a time. Do not calculate the odds or dwell on all the potential perils. Face the situation as soon as possible. That is your best chance of overcoming it. What matters is the present situation, not what might happen. Focus on what you have to carry and do right now. That is enough. Do not let your imagination of all the possible bad outcomes crush you. Stay focused on the first impressions, what you directly see and have to address. There are always some concrete steps you can take to start improving the situation, no matter how dire it seems. Focus on those steps rather than becoming overwhelmed by the enormity of the problem. Move forward incrementally. Do not make the situation worse by endlessly worrying and obsessing. Act. Have courage in the face of difficulties. Do not be deterred or frightened by hardships or challenges. View them as opportunities to become stronger and better. With each struggle we survive, we gain experience and confidence to face the next one. Difficulties are what make victory and success so meaningful. The overall message is, have courage, focus on the present, and take action. Do not become paralyzed by fear of what might be. Face difficulties head-on and view them as a chance to grow. Stay focused on the task before you rather than becoming overwhelmed by the bigger picture. Move forward, one step at a time. There is always something you can do to start improving the situation. It's easier to do something well if you're focused, worried about how others will react, expecting failure, or concentrating on why it's a bad idea. You need to be fully present and committed. We must determine the full extent of other people's struggles or what motivates their actions. It's easy to judge but hard to understand, honestly. We should avoid harshly judging others for what we perceive as cowardice or failure. Fear determines what we believe is possible. If we think something is too scary, we won't even attempt it. We can choose to believe either that we have agency and control over our situations or that we are powerless against circumstances. Feeling in our agency and ability to change things is empowering. After World War II, Viktor Frankl noted an existential vacuum in society. Despite the defeat of evil and improvements in technology and living standards, people lacked meaning, hope, and happiness. Frankl believed people needed to find purpose and meaning to overcome cynicism and despair. Today, we tend to view ourselves and history in an overly cynical light. We can see humanity continuing a long struggle toward progress or as irredeemably flawed and causing damage. Our beliefs shape how we view the world and our potential. We seem afraid to believe in humanity's potential for good. The key themes are overcoming fear and cynicism by believing in human agency, potential, and progress. Judging others harshly is counterproductive. Finding meaning and purpose helps combat despair. Our beliefs shape our reality. The passage discusses how growth and progress always require taking risks and leaping into the unknown. It argues that courage would not be needed if everything were specific and well-defined. It gives several examples to illustrate this. Signing the Declaration of Independence required immense courage from the founders, who were putting their lives on the line. In a fable, a boy is told to leap into a bottomless hole to progress. Tiger Woods had to completely reinvent his golf swing multiple times, even though it was scary and uncertain. Reed Hastings had to risk his successful DVD by mail business to start the streaming service that became Netflix. The main message is that all growth is a leap in the dark. If you are afraid to take risks and leap into uncertainty, you will never achieve or create anything worthwhile. The coward waits for certainty and assurances that will never come. The courageous are willing to leap without knowing the probabilities or outcomes. The passage argues that courage and risk-taking are required to achieve progress and growth because the future is uncertain. If we wait for assurances and certainty, we will accomplish little. We must be willing to leap into the dark to move forward. Fear often paralyzes us and prevents us from taking action. We become consumed by worrying about consequences and second-guessing ourselves. But, avoiding decisions out of fear often leads to missing opportunities and losing agency over our lives. It's better to choose and deal with the consequences rather than be paralyzed by inaction. Our safety should be something other than our top priority. Living a meaningful, impactful life often requires taking risks and doing the right thing, even when it's scary. Avoiding risk does not necessarily make us safe. Fear can show us something important, like an opportunity we should seize or a situation we should address. Feeling fear is a sign we're challenging ourselves and living boldly. Theodore Roosevelt invited Booker T. Washington to dine at the White House, even though he feared backlash. But he felt ashamed of that fear and pushed through it. His bold action made history. The key messages are, don't be paralyzed by fear and indecision. Make choices and deal with the consequences. Don't put your safety above all else. A meaningful life requires taking risks. Fear can point you to essential opportunities or work you need to do. Use fear as a motivator rather than a deterrent. Pushing through fear can lead to making history and creating real change. Fear often points us to opportunity and growth, though our first instinct is to avoid scary or difficult things. We should not be afraid to take counsel of our fears and do the opposite. It's scary to be your authentic self, but we must have the courage to do so. Frank Serpico stood up against police corruption because he refused to conform, even though it made him a target. We are unique, yet we push that away out of fear of standing out. Life's pivotal moments happen publicly, where we risk embarrassment and judgment. We must get used to that. Jerry Weintraub gave up his dream of acting because he couldn't handle wearing tights in public, unlike his classmate James Caan. Most success requires putting yourself out there. Most fear of public discomfort ranks higher than even fear of death. The Roman orator Crassus felt crippling fear before every speech, though he was a master. We must, like him, push through fear to achieve our potential. It is always worse in the beginning but gets easier with experience. In summary, fear prevents us from having opportunity, authenticity, and achievement. We must be courageous to do scary and difficult things, be our true selves, and put ourselves in the public eye. With practice, fear lessens, but courage is always required. The summary ends by reiterating the critical examples of Frank Serpico, Jerry Weintraub, and Crassus as individuals who overcame fear to fulfill their destinies. Having courage in the face of fear and difficulty is a choice. We can choose to be guided by fear and play it safe, or we can choose to push past fear and do what is right. While fear serves an essential purpose in self-preservation, if everyone acted solely out of fear, progress would not be possible. Good would not triumph over evil, and nothing would improve. We must choose not to be ruled by fear. It takes courage and bravery to rise above fear. Though the reasonable and self-serving thing is often to avoid risk and difficulty, progress depends on those willing to be unreasonable and brave. There are many sayings urging us to go with the flow and not make waves, but if everyone believed that, fear would rule, and things would never get better. We must choose a different path. Though it is often easier to play it safe, conform, hide, and be cynical, we can choose to break through those fears, forge our way, and keep going rather than turn back. Having courage in the face of anxiety and difficulty allows all other good things to happen. Fear before a difficult challenge is standard and provides the final mental preparation. Pushing past that initial fear of the unknown is what allows us to rise to the challenge. We prove ourselves by overcoming fear, not by avoiding it. In summary, while fear serves a purpose, progress depends on courage and bravery in the face of fear. We must choose not to be ruled by fear and instead forge our path. Having courage allows all good things to be possible. Courage is overcoming fear and taking action. It is seizing one's destiny and doing what needs to be done, even in the face of great difficulty or danger. Charles de Gaulle showed immense courage in refusing to accept France's surrender to Germany in World War II. Even though he held little official power, he believed in France and called for continued resistance against the Nazis. His courage helped inspire the French resistance movement. De Gaulle was tried in absentia and sentenced to death by the Vichy regime, collaborating with Germany. He and his family survived many assassination attempts. They showed remarkable grit and fearlessness in the face of such grave threats. De Gaulle's courage highlighted the cowardice of those who lacked the will to resist the Nazis. Many French people accepted occupation and even assisted the German war effort out of fear and a desire for normalcy. De Gaulle demanded that people do their duty and fight for freedom. De Gaulle's determination rallied support for the resistance not just in France but around the world. He came to symbolize the spirit of France that refused to give up hope. When Paris was liberated in 1944 after 4 years of occupation, de Gaulle gave a famous victory speech celebrating the city's freedom, achieved through the efforts of the French people and the Allies. The summary is that courage in the face of fear and danger can inspire others and change the course of history. One courageous person can make a majority. De Gaulle's courageous leadership and refusal to despair saved France. In 1940, France fell to Nazi Germany. Charles de Gaulle, a French general, gave a defiant speech urging the French people to resist the German occupation. On August 26, 1944, de Gaulle led the liberation of Paris from Nazi control. He walked into the Notre Dame Cathedral amid gunfire to help calm the crowds. His courage helped unite and inspire the French resistance. Freeing Paris was a pivotal moment but part of a long, arduous journey. De Gaulle had to build support, gain allies, raise money, and overcome political enemies to free France. He showed immense patience, determination, and courage. De Gaulle was a polarizing and controversial figure who made many enemies. But his fierce independence and refusal to back down were critical to his success. As he said, "If I were easy to work with, I would today be in Pétain's general staff." De Gaulle believed he was playing a role in France's grand destiny. He felt guided by the same spirit that guided historical French heroes like Joan of Arc. This sense of destiny gave him courage. Though de Gaulle's stand seemed solitary, his courage inspired others. As he said, "I am a man who belongs to nobody, and belongs to everybody." His bold acts helped the French resistance grow. The world constantly tests our courage through difficult situations. We show our courage through action, not words. De Gaulle showed the world the depth of his courage. When an important task must be done, we must ask ourselves, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? We each have a unique role to play in destiny. We must have the courage to fulfill it. When we fail to act, it deprives the world of something valuable we can only provide. Our inaction ripples out and impacts others. If we don't do something, like adopt a child or start a business, likely no one else will. And even if someone does, it will be different. We each have unique skills and perspectives to offer. Believing you can make a difference is the first step. The next is realizing you are the one who can make that difference. Fear often comes from a lack of preparation and competence. The more we prepare and gain experience, the braver we become. Training and practice are essential. Even in desperate situations, doing anything is better than doing nothing. It occupies our minds, lifts our spirits, and shows our resolve. The enemy fears the disciplined. We don't need grand acts of courage to get started. Small actions, petite actions, build momentum and lead to bigger things. Start small but start. Focus on what you can do now, however small. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Your actions and those of others add up over time to solve massive problems. While it's good to think big, start small. Take things step by step. Your headlights only show a bit of the road ahead. That's all you need to get going. Keep moving forward. Charles Lindbergh had many reasons not to attempt the first solo transatlantic flight. It seemed impossible and incredibly dangerous. But he was staying on the ground guaranteed failure. He went anyway. Despite the risks and uncertainty, he acted. And he made history. The overall message is, have courage. Believe in yourself. Start now, however small the action. Keep going. Your acts matter and inspire others. Though the road is long, focus on the next step. Do not be paralyzed by fear or perfectionism. Go. Here's a summary. The narrator is running late for a flight but hesitates due to fear and doubt. To overcome fear, you must take action. You go. Staying stationary ensures failure. Although risky, action is the only path to potential success. Many come to regret inaction and wish they had at least tried. Decimus Laberius was a Roman writer Julius Caesar ordered to perform for him. Rather than obeying meekly, Laberius used the opportunity to boldly and cleverly criticize Caesar to his face. This kind of courageous truth-telling in the face of power was known as parrhesia. While it may seem strange, speaking truth to power is a moral obligation. Staying silent out of fear or convenience is a betrayal of truth and makes one complicit. Society needs people willing to challenge the status quo and tell unpleasant truths. General George Marshall was adept at cutting through indecision and telling others, "Don't fight the problem, decide it." Making clear and courageous decisions is rare but essential for leadership and success. Leaders like Marshall and Truman had to make many consequential decisions in short order. While challenging, they focused on following through rather than endlessly debating. Delaying or avoiding decisions is more about comfort than finding the right choice. Whatever you're not changing, you're choosing, later, you'll wish you had acted. The best time to solve a problem is now. In summary, overcoming fear and indecision requires courageous action. Though complicated, speaking truth to power and making tough choices are moral and leadership obligations. Delay often stems more from discomfort than prudence. The time for action and decision is now. The key message is that courage often comes in short bursts, lasting seconds. Those moments define us and shape history. Several examples are given to illustrate this, including, Martin Luther King Jr. was released after JFK and RFK made calls to help, winning JFK crucial votes. Nixon's lack of action cost him. The story of a British man who bought his own on a whim after 20 seconds of courage. Harry Burns, an ordinary politician, suddenly voted to ratify women's suffrage, going against his party in a moment of courage. The summary argues that we don't have to be constantly courageous, just courageous for crucial seconds that can change everything. While the results are uncertain, inaction guarantees failure. Courage is often sparked by a quick decision to act, leap, and step up. Though those choices are difficult, momentum builds, and fear fades. A person isn't born courageous, we show courage at specific moments. With a few seconds of courage, we can achieve great things. And that is enough. Frederick Douglass decided one day that he had had enough of the abuse from his slave breaker, Edward Covey. When Covey came to punish Douglass, the 17-year-old enslaved person grabbed Covey by the throat and beat him up. This was extremely risky, as enslaved people could be killed for assaulting white men. Douglass and Covey fought for 2 hours, with Douglass fighting for his life and dignity. Eventually, Covey gave up, tired and afraid. Though Covey claimed it was to teach Douglass a lesson, it was a humiliating defeat. This moment was transformative for Douglass. He felt liberated and empowered, resolving that while he may remain enslaved in legal form, he would never again be enslaved in spirit. This empowerment is traced back to when Douglass was 8 and watched another enslaved person, Nellie, be brutally whipped. Douglass was scarred by her cries and the arrogance of the overseer. He vowed that one day, he would fight back. The fight with Covey fulfilled this vow and showed Douglass that he could stand up for himself. He realized that, by resisting, he could take away the power his oppressors held over him through fear and violence. His self-confidence and determination grew as a result. In standing up to his oppressor, Douglass demonstrated that there comes a time when people get tired of being trampled over by the iron feet of oppression. His bold resistance and self-empowerment in the face of enormous risk and impossible odds illustrated his indomitable will and courage. Frederick Douglass witnessed a slave woman, Nellie, fight back fiercely against an overseer trying to whip her. Though hit, her defiant spirit made a lasting impression on Douglass and gave him courage. We cannot tolerate injustice or abuse. We must stand up for ourselves and demand our rights. Submission will not make problems go away. Courage is contagious. One person standing up bravely can inspire others and shift the tide. We each have more power than we realize to make a difference through courage. Leaders must take responsibility for their decisions and actions. Saying, "It's not my fault," is cowardly. The willingness to accept responsibility is the source of self-respect. The poet Alfred Lord Tennyson showed cowardice by publishing his poem about the charge of the Light Brigade under a pseudonym to avoid criticism. We must own and stand behind our words and actions. Jeremiah Denton, a POW in Vietnam, showed courage during a propaganda interview by blinking DORTURE and Morse code at significant risk to himself. His defiance and courage were an inspiration. There are always opportunities for courage and resistance, even in the darkest times. With courage, we can endure and light the way for others. Admiral Jeremiah Denton was a POW during the Vietnam War. When forced to participate in a propaganda video, he blinked the word torture in Morse code to signal his captivity conditions to the outside world. This was an act of defiance and courage. Stoics resist oppression and stand up for what is right, even under pressure. Examples include Frederick Douglass, the Spartans who fought King Philip, and Charles de Gaulle. We all have the power to defy tyrants and bullies. The saying "fortune favors the bold" means that risk-takers and those who dare considerably have the best chance of success. Boldness and courage can lead to luck and opportunity. Examples of bold risk-takers include Rommel, Bezos, Roosevelt, and de Gaulle. It takes courage to believe in ideals and causes. Roosevelt and de Gaulle were mocked for their earnest beliefs but persisted anyway. Their commitment to their causes motivated them to take risks and change history. Cynicism is cowardly, but faith requires courage. Those who dare to believe in the face of doubt and criticism can achieve great things. In summary, courage is demonstrated through acts of defiance, commitment to ideals, willingness to take risks, and belief in the face of doubt. Individuals can stand up to oppression, motivate change, and make their luck with courage and boldness. Groups of people have always tried to convince the courageous and hopeful that their efforts are pointless or foolish. Academics, in particular, have used their intelligence to confuse issues rather than provide clarity. It takes courage and strength to persevere in the face of these naysayers and temptations to give up. The story of Kitty Genovese illustrates both cowardice and courage. While many neighbors ignored her cries for help as she was murdered, her friend Sophia rushed to help and comfort Kitty in her dying moments. Though Sophia could not save Kitty, her effort and kindness exemplify courage and compassion. We must follow her example and help our neighbors when we can. Courage must be balanced with moderation. Recklessness can be as dangerous as cowardice. Indeed, courageous individuals are careful and weigh risks. They do not boast or pick unnecessary fights. Courage is about taking necessary risks, not proving one's bravado. The brave are often quiet, knowing that bragging only makes them targets. But when decisiveness is needed, the courageous act is. In summary, we must not give in to indifference or recklessness. We should follow the example of compassionate and informed individuals like Sophia, who help others in need. And we must cultivate courage balanced by careful consideration of risks and consequences. Moderation and courage together can accomplish great things. But courage alone is rash, and inaction is cowardly. The virtuous path lies between these extremes. Maria Giovanna, Frank Serpico's mother, emigrated from Italy to America in search of opportunity, leaving her husband behind temporarily. During the sea crossing, she went into labor and gave birth prematurely. The baby sadly did not survive. She arrived alone in winter, not speaking English, and ended up in a charity hospital. She was rescued by distant relatives and worked in factories for a year while waiting for her husband to join her. When Serpico's father arrived, the only work he could find was shining shoes. It took almost 10 years for him to open his cobbler shop, which had been his dream. Despite immense hardships and setbacks, the Serpicos persevered and raised 3 children, one of whom would go on to fight corruption in the NYPD. The story is a testament to determination, grit, and courage in the face of adversity. Maria Giovanna showed immense bravery in traveling alone to a new country while pregnant, losing her child, and still finding the strength to build a life. The key themes are perseverance, courage, determination, and overcoming obstacles through sheer will and hard work. Maria Giovanna embodied a stoic ability to accept what could not be changed and the resolve to change what was within her power. Her story highlights the immense sacrifices immigrants often make in search of opportunity and the depth of human resilience. General Douglas MacArthur faced seemingly insurmountable odds in the Korean War. The North Koreans had invaded South Korea and pushed UN forces into a small perimeter, where they were ordered to fight to the death. Victory seemed impossible. MacArthur devised a bold plan: launch an amphibious invasion at Incheon, 150 miles behind enemy lines. But Incheon was a nightmare location for an attack, with mudflats, strong tides, seawalls, and mines. Everyone told MacArthur the odds of success were tiny. But MacArthur didn't care about the odds. He knew the improbability of an invasion at Incheon meant the North Koreans wouldn't expect it. He believed that courage and willpower could overcome any obstacles. While his superiors said the attack was not impossible, MacArthur saw that as a chance, and that's all courage needs. High hurdles mean an opportunity for the brave to win. MacArthur dismissed cautions and warnings as timidity and defeatism. He estimated the odds of success at just 1 in 5,000. But that was enough, he said. We must act now, or we will die. And on September 15, 1950, MacArthur's invasion of Incheon succeeded. He had beaten the odds through sheer courage and determination. Here is a summary of the passage: fortune favors the bold. Progress would only happen with people willing to take risks against the odds. Successful people, leaders, and innovators defy averages and predictions. They believe they can beat the odds through courage and determination. We should remember the examples of courageous people from history to inspire courage. Figures like Cato the Younger and his children, who went down fighting for their ideals, can motivate us. We don't want to let down the legacy of courageous ancestors who came before us. Acts of altruism and self-sacrifice are more complicated to explain than courage. Heroism, the highest form of courage where one sacrifices for others, is particularly perplexing but essential. True heroism humbles us because it comes from something beyond reason or self-interest. Heroism is rare courage where one risks oneself for the benefit of others or a greater cause. Heroes enter a higher plane and briefly touch greatness through their willingness to sacrifice for others. They do what others cannot and save people in times of danger and despair. Heroism inspires because it shows the heights of human potential. In summary, courage and heroism push humans to rise above themselves, defy the odds, and achieve things that seem impossible or unreasonable. By risking themselves for others, heroes reach a form of greatness that inspires and gives hope. Their examples motivate us to find courage in ourselves. Fortune favors the bold, but heroism favors humanity. The key ideas are that courage, especially the self-sacrificing courage of heroism, allows humans to achieve greatness and progress in a way that inspires others. Heroism is the ultimate expression of human potential that we celebrate through stories and draw on for motivation. By risking themselves, heroes save others in times of most profound need. Their unreasonable courage gives us reason to hope. In 480 BC, the Persian king Xerxes invaded Greece with an enormous army, seeking to conquer the Greeks. Many Greek city-states surrendered or took bribes to ally with Xerxes. But King Leonidas of Sparta led 300 Spartan soldiers to Thermopylae to hold off the Persians. Though vastly outnumbered, the Spartans were fighting for freedom and courage, not money or power. Leonidas rejected Xerxes' bribes and attempts to get the Spartans to surrender. The Spartans were devoted to valor and sacrifice for the greater good. The 300 Spartans and their allies fought the Persians at Thermopylae for 3 days. Though they inflicted heavy losses, the Spartans knew they would ultimately die. On the final day, Leonidas was killed, but the Spartans fought on. They retreated to a narrow passage but continued fighting when their weapons broke, using their hands and teeth. The Spartans' brave stand inspired the rest of Greece to continue resisting Xerxes. Though the 300 Spartans died, they had bought Greece a week's time and shaken Xerxes' confidence. Their sacrifice allowed the Greeks to later defeat Xerxes at Salamis and Plataea. The Spartans' courage and sacrifice at Thermopylae preserved freedom and democracy in Greece, allowing Western civilization to develop. Though the stand of the 300 was a military defeat, it was a moral victory that still inspires today. The freedom we enjoy today was won by the sacrifice of heroes like the 300 Spartans. The summary highlights how the 300 Spartans embodied exceptional courage, sacrifice, and devotion to a higher cause in defending freedom against tyranny at Thermopylae. Their stand has enduring power and significance. The ancient Spartans displayed immense courage and sacrifice at the Battle of Thermopylae. They fought against the larger Persian army, knowing they would likely die. Their obedience to Spartan law and love for their country drove them to this heroic act. True courage and heroism come from fighting for a just cause, not just for the thrill of it or out of blind obedience. The Spartans' sacrifice was meaningful because it was for the greater good of Greece. In contrast, the editors of Gawker acted courageously in quitting their jobs over a story, but they fought for the wrong reasons and principles. Their bravery was empty. Abraham Lincoln repeatedly tried to avoid escalating tensions and prevent the Civil War. Even after the South seceded and attacked federal forts, Lincoln chose not to retaliate with force. He appealed to shared bonds of affection and called for peace. Lincoln's restraint showed immense courage and moral conviction. The braver choice is not always to fight but sometimes to pursue peace against all odds. In short, true heroism comes from fighting for what is right and for the greater good of others. It is driven by love, for one's country, values, and humanity. Empty displays of courage for the wrong reasons or unjust causes are hollow and even dangerous. The bravest act can sometimes be refusing to fight and instead seeking understanding. As the saying goes, the cause makes all. Suffering, discomfort, and worry require courage to endure. But wisdom and compassion obligate us to try and protect others from unnecessary suffering as well. True heroes work to prevent conflict, not just fight in it. Nonviolent protest requires immense courage. It is more complex than violence and war. People like Gandhi and Malala Yousafzai show this kind of courage. We often overlook or underappreciate acts of courage and heroism that prevent conflicts and suffering. We prefer more dramatic and violent acts of heroism in our media and stories. But preventing conflict is most courageous. Visionary leaders like FDR and Lincoln showed courage through policies and decisions that prevented future problems, though they often go uncelebrated. A nation needs soldiers, physical courage, and statesmen, moral courage. It is immoral to provoke unnecessary conflict. True courage involves restraint, looking foolish to do the right thing, and thinking of the consequences for others. Fear and selfishness lead to escalation and lose-lose outcomes. Great leaders have often endured exile, imprisonment, rejection, and isolation. This wilderness period helps forge their courage, vision, and dynamism. They must be willing to stand alone for their beliefs. Visionaries are often ahead of their times and alienated from society. But they cannot moderate their beliefs just to fit in. Enduring isolation and rejection can be a crucible to develop courage and purpose. Churchill is an example of a leader who endured years in the wilderness, using it to read, write, rest, and prepare. He emerged with the psychic dynamite to lead when called. De Gaulle also spoke of crossing the desert, years out of power, to find one's purpose. The main message is that courage, leadership, and heroism often involve restrained rejection of unnecessary conflict, the ability to endure isolation while staying true to one's purpose and vision. The wilderness periods of life forge this kind of courage and wisdom. Though uncelebrated, these acts of moral courage are most heroic. Charles de Gaulle endured years of struggle and rejection before rising to lead and save France. His perseverance in the face of failure inspired and strengthened him. Difficult periods in life are inevitable. One must show patience, endurance, and love to overcome them. Do not give up hope on the people counting on you. View such struggles as part of the journey. Love drove James Stockdale to sacrifice himself to end the torture of his fellow bows. He was willing to die to alleviate the suffering of others, showing the selflessness of true courage. Other examples of self-sacrificing love include Diet Quang Duc, who lit himself on fire to protest the persecution, and Stanley Levinson, who quietly severed ties with Martin Luther King Jr. to protect him, even though it was painful. True heroes make the people around them better and stronger. They provide inspiration, mentorship, encouragement, and contagious qualities like calm and compassion. Though they may not receive reward or recognition, their impact and memory live on. The essence of greatness is improving and uplifting other lives. One person can start a movement or change the tide with a word, deed, or sacrifice. Though the results may not be seen in one's lifetime, the trail they leave behind gives others hope and strength. The motivation for heroism should not be for one's success or reward but for the betterment of others. Happiness comes from improving other people's lives, not just one with them but even in their memory. The key message is that true courage, leadership, and heroism come from selfless love, sacrifice, and the desire to strengthen and uplift others. One person can immensely impact through words, actions, and examples. The memory of such selfless good lives inspires future generations. We all must help others reach their full potential, even if it requires sacrifice on our part. Hesitation in moments of crisis leads to inaction and prevents us from accomplishing anything or saving anyone. We must act with courage. Real heroism requires only a few seconds of courage. In those moments, there is no time to overthink or hesitate. It would help if you acted based on your duty and values. The hero does what is right regardless of the outcome. We cannot passively wait for the opportunity to be heroic. We must seek opportunities to make a difference, big and small. True good fortune comes from good character, intentions, and actions, not luck. We make our purpose. Fearlessness and confidence can be inspiring and compelling. We can convince others, deter resistance, and save lives by demonstrating absolute fearlessness in dangerous situations. Heroism requires discipline and commitment to something greater than yourself. In summary, we all must help others. We must act with courage in moments of crisis. Real heroism only requires a few seconds of courage to do what is right. We make our purpose and cannot wait for opportunity, and fearlessness and confidence can compel and inspire others. We must seek to make a difference whenever we can. Leaders must show courage and fearlessness in danger or adversity. They cannot protect themselves while letting their followers face risks. They must have skin in the game and show they care through their actions. Philosophers like Bertrand Russell argued that life itself is more important than principles like freedom. But others argue there are worse things than dying, like living without dignity or purpose. We admire those who sacrifice for a cause, like Socrates, Jesus, and lesser-known heroes. True courage means accepting the costs and consequences of doing the right thing. It means sacrificing for the greater good, even losing money, status, or life. Businesses show courage when prioritizing people over profits, like when CVS stopped selling tobacco products. Courage pushes us to ask why we are here and what we are willing to stand up for. It gives life purpose and meaning beyond just survival. We resist nihilism by asserting our agency and standing up for ourselves and others. Examples of courage include Florence Nightingale overcoming objections to follow her calling and Michael Jordan walking away from basketball at the peak of his career. True courage is driven by purpose, not accolades or ambition. The key themes are sacrifice, purpose, and standing up for values and the greater good. The vengeful or heroic one refers to a leader or anyone showing courage this way. Jeff Bezos' boss initially didn't support his idea for Amazon because he thought it would be better for someone without an existing job. But taking risks and doing unconventional things for selfless reasons can lead to heroism. Maya Moore was at the top of her basketball career but paused to help free an unjustly incarcerated man. Her decision showed courage and self-sacrifice. Heroism often means dedicating yourself to something that goes against self-interest. Dietrich Bonhoeffer left Nazi Germany for the US but quickly returned because he felt he needed to share the suffering of his people. Staying to fight injustice often requires more courage than fleeing. Activists like Alexei Navalny and Xu Ziyang also chose to stay and resist authoritarian governments despite the risks. Frank Serpico and Paul Robeson stayed to fight corruption and racism in the U.S. instead of quitting or fleeing. Martin Luther King Jr. returned to Montgomery despite the danger because he felt staying away would be cowardly. Heroes sacrifice their safety and self-interest for the greater good. Speaking up against wrongdoing is often seen as causing trouble, but silence can enable harm. A young assistant didn't object to vague orders for General MacArthur during the Korean War, allowing MacArthur's aggression to escalate to war. Speaking up, even at risk to oneself, can prevent more significant harm. As Marcus Aurelius said, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. In summary, real courage and heroism often mean not taking the easy way out, not fleeing from injustice or danger, and sacrificing safety, reputation, and self-interest to do what's right and stand up for others. Staying silent in the face of wrongdoing is itself a form of harm. True heroes dedicate themselves to a cause greater than themselves. Doing nothing in the face of injustice can be just as unjust as actively committing injustice. Inaction and silence in the face of wrongdoing allow suffering to persist. Historically, many heroes and world changers had to sacrifice and endure hardship to do the right thing, even if it was unpopular or risky. For example, Florence Nightingale revolutionized nursing despite facing opposition. World War II leaders like de Gaulle fought even when defeat seemed imminent. Scientists and artists have pushed past censors and challengers to advance knowledge and culture. Not all survived, but their sacrifices made the world better. It can be scary to speak up against injustice, but we cultivate the courage to make a difference. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, "A time comes when silence is betrayal." We must be willing to sacrifice to do what is right. It is heroic to accept personal loss or discomfort to do what is right and help others. We can't stay silent or passive. We have to confront injustice, even if it's complicated. It's the only way to create change. Having hope and faith in people and progress is one of the bravest things we can do. Despite hardship, we must not give up on humanity or a better future. Hope gives us the courage and strength to endure and make a difference. Leaders spread hope. We cannot surrender to bitterness, despair, or defeat. We must reject hopelessness and believe in the possibility of redemption and progress. We must tell stories of agency and hope. That is the key to a better future. Endurance is not enough. We must refuse to surrender our spirit or values. Like Epictetus, we cannot give in to hopelessness even under duress. We burn the white flag of surrender and fight for what we believe in, like Cato and Emmeline Pankhurst. Though the world may defeat us, we never quit. Our spirit remains unbroken. That's the essence of the message and examples presented. The key themes are having courage and hope, refusing to surrender in the face of hardship, and being willing to sacrifice to make a difference in the world. Does this summary accurately reflect the overall ideas? Let me know if you want me to clarify or expand the outline. Courage is essential for all virtues. Other virtues like temperance, justice, and wisdom are meaningless without courage. Courage allows us to live by these virtues in a world that does not always reward them. Virtue is not just something we talk about, it is something we must act on. Words don't matter, deeds do. We must have the courage to live virtuously and stand up for what is right. The people we admire from history were imperfect, but they showed courage at critical moments to do tremendous and virtuous things. Their courage and character inspired others then and continue to inspire us today. We honor the courage and sacrifice of those who came before us by choosing to live virtuously. We must continue their tradition and follow their example. Virtue is not just something we signal to others, it is a way of living that requires courage in action. Courage and virtue are deeply connected. Courage is the backbone of integrity, allowing virtue to stand up in difficult times. Virtue gives courage, purpose, and direction. Together, courage and virtue create a character and determine destiny. The author was asked by the CEO of American Apparel, Dolph Charney, to leak revenge porn of a woman suing him when the author was 23. The author refused but did not quit or report Charney. The author reflects that this was an act of some courage but insufficient. The author should have quit or done more. The author stayed at the company for years, justifying it by believing they were helping employees and steering the company in a better direction. But the author was still complicit. In 2014, Charney spiraled downward. The board fired him. The author advocated for this and helped in the aftermath. But new leadership brought Charney partially back, and the author quit in protest. The company ultimately went bankrupt twice, costing 10,000 jobs. The author received death threats from Charney's associates. The author realized they had blinded themselves to Charney and debased themselves. Leaving felt much better. The author compares themselves to Seneca, who worked for Nero. The author compromised and fell short of their words. Things worsened slowly, and the author failed to make hard decisions. Lack of agency was contagious at the company as people passively watched Charney. The summary highlights the author's moral journey about Charney and American Apparel: initial courage but prolonged compromise, eventual protest and advocacy, and ultimate realization of failure and the need to act decisively in the face of wrongdoing. The story shows how hard it can be to stand up for ethics within organizations and against strong leaders. But courage and moral action are possible, even if late, and necessary. The author discusses how, as he and his colleagues grew older and more successful working for Seneca, they conveniently forgot that they needed to hold Seneca accountable for his actions. Factors like confidentiality agreements, severance packages, personal connections, and fear deterred them from speaking up. The author says Seneca himself believed virtue consists of studying truth, conducting oneself properly, and reviewing one's experiences to learn from them. Although conduct is crucial, we can grow by reflecting on our failures. Seneca eventually stood up to Nero, while the author finally spoke up against Trump and faced retaliation. The author argues we must have courage in ordinary life, not just in extreme circumstances. It takes courage to stand up to a boss, follow your creative passions, draw ethical lines, be authentic, or vote your conscience. The author admits he has only sometimes shown courage but is improving. He published this book as an example. He wants us to step up more than step back and make courage a habit. Courage calls to all of us. Can we get better at answering its call? Can we step up more than step back? Let's start there. The author provides additional reading recommendations and resources for learning about Stoicism. He thanks his support network, frontline workers, and medical professionals during COVID-19. He acknowledges he remains indebted to past generations of courageous individuals. About the author: Ryan Holiday is a best-selling philosopher and author of books like The Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy, The Daily Stoic, and Theoicata. The author's books have sold over 4 million copies and have appeared in 40-plus languages. He lives in Texas with his family and farm animals. He also owns a bookstore. He uses quotes from the Bible, the Odyssey, and historical figures like Abraham Lincoln and Charles de Gaulle to illustrate points. He discusses Confederate General George McClellan, naval mines, torpedoes, in the U.S. Civil War, suffragettes, and following orders as a soldier. He mentions his books Conspiracy and Ego as the Enemy and Prince Albert's role in keeping Britain out of the U.S. Civil War. He refers to the Apostles, Christianity, and nihilism. The overall tone seems philosophical and focused on learning from history. Book link: click here.